Welcome to the webinar. My name is Deborah Gallant. You are joining us for a deep dive presented by Entrepreneurs Forever. Today's program is a little different than some other ones we've done in that we're going to have a panel discussion. So you're going to be listening to me less and hopefully to our panelists far more. And I have some questions for them and hopefully my experience is that our groups generally have very enthusiastic reactions and conversations going on. Now, I know that all of you won't be in the exact same categories as our presenters are for this topic, but I still think this is a terrific topic. And I'm going to start with sort of my intro slides. And hopefully by then we'll have a full panel and we will get going. So today's topic is getting on retail shelves. It's a panel discussion, a deep dive from Entrepreneurs Forever. We'll do some quick introductions. I'm going to talk about the upcoming programs. Then we're going to have our presentation, our panel discussion. And then actually, I think it's all going to be recorded, including the Q&A today. Our mission is to empower all small business owners to grow thriving businesses that sustain their families and support their communities. If you don't know about Entrepreneurs Forever, you can attend one of our weekly business boosts and learn more. Our upcoming learning opportunities, we have one coming up in a month called Exiting My Business. Maybe you just started and you're not really ready to exit, but it's always good to keep in mind, how the heck do I get out of this? Succession planning, selling your business. And we're doing one on Friday, October 11th, my favorite technology tools with our member, Phil DeMuro of Founders Approach. So I think that one's going to be really fun as well. If you're not already signed up for tomorrow's Small Business Virtual Summit, it's all morning, 8:30 to 11, 9 to 11:30. And you can still sign up on our website. And there's our last panelist, which is great. And this is my disclaimer. I think the disclaimer is probably not hard and fast today, but this presentation does not take the place of professional advice from your own paid advisors. So I don't want you coming back and suing us. Lisa told me this. It's like, yeah, Lisa's giving you her best advice as a generous favor to us. And hopefully there'll be some great interaction, but go check with your own advisors before you take it to the bank. So I have rounded up a panel, and Julia, I apologize because I could only find a picture of Stru, but I'm going to start with Lisa Newman. Lisa's a neighbor of mine here in Western Massachusetts. She is a serial entrepreneur in the food business, cereal, S-E-R-I-A-L, not, I don't think you've made cereal. Maybe she has. She's going to tell us her story in a minute. I think she's done that too. And when she and I met for coffee at a local place, she's like, oh, I have a lot to say about this. So I was like, you are on, hun. So she's going to bring her knowledge to bear. Stru and Julia are also neighbors of mine, but on the other side of the way, which is near the Hudson River. And they have a new drink product called Lifesaver Drinks, and they're going to tell you way more about it. And also their origin story, which is so interesting from hair cutting. So they'll tell you about that. And then Diane is a member of Entrepreneurs Forever in Pittsburgh and owns and runs a market. And Diane, I'm going to say it wrong. So I think I said Dilamatos, and now Katie says it's Dilamatos. Is that right?
Yes, my oldest son's name is Dylan, so think Dilamatos.
Dilamatos. Okay, so the way we're going to format this is I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to give each of our panelists, and Stru and Julia count as one, even though it's really two of them, to about 7 minutes to tell their story of kind of who their business is, sort of what their experience in this space is. I have some very specific questions I'm going to ask, but I'm going to also give you guys opportunity to ask your own questions. This should be a freewheeling conversation. And I also hope you'll ask questions of each other. So if Stru doesn't ask Diane if he can get shelf space, then I'll think I have failed as a presenter because I won't have made that connection. So hopefully you guys will all learn from each other and some great stuff will happen. Lisa, you got on first. So I'm going to give you your 7 minutes of glory. Tell us your story.
7 minutes. Bro. Well, I don't know. I have a couple of minutes anyway that will be relevant. But um, hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Newman, and I have been an entrepreneur for almost 50 years. And wow, it's a long time. And I started in the food business. I was one of those people who grew a little food business and then exited by someone approaching me to buy the company, which was great because it allowed me to sort of snowball my experience over time. Wait, you guys, Deb, how do I see everyone else? Right now I'm just looking at myself, which is really
Yeah, I
irritating.
pinned you so that you would be the spotlight. I can take that
Oh,
away.
all right. Well, however you want it. I wanted to talk to them, not to myself. Anyway, but so I have had several businesses and mostly in the food industry and have had my own outlets, retail outlets, have dealt with a lot of grocery and food service. I thought that this was what's interesting is this appropriately is named deep dive. And the most important thing I can tell you is as you develop your company in relation to getting your products on retail shelves, is that go deep first and not try to get in everywhere. You'll likely, in any industry you're in, you'll likely have representation that will say, oh, I can get you into 22,000 supermarkets across the country. It's really important to do a deep dive into discovering who you are, not just what you intend to do, who you are in the marketplace, where you feel comfortable, and all of that. So, because I wasn't, even though there may have obviously was some success when I built a company and then someone wanted to buy it from me, um, I didn't always know what to do. We didn't have e-for-all back then. I didn't know that that was the right thing to do, but you sort of figure it out as you go along. So it's really important to dig deeply into the industry you're in, dig um, dive deeply into your own business, your soul, what you love, because obviously, as you probably noticed already, this is taking over your life, right? Pretty much. Yeah.
So, Lisa,
I don't
did,
see
did
names, but
you
oh,
did
yeah.
you mean that you sold directly yourself and you didn't use a middleman when you were starting to place your products on shelves?
Uh no, there's a the middle man, the middle person is usually, if you're going to deal with uh supermarkets, for example, they're going to tell you what brokers or what industry middle people they prefer to use, because they don't want a million vendors knocking on their doors, and they don't want a million vendors shipping things in just the way they might ship them in, as opposed to being well coordinated within a system. So there are brokerage houses of organized food reps. And I know this works, this is in other industries too. Um, but anyway, there are organized food reps. I didn't, very early on, it wasn't until I got bigger and worked with bigger companies that we really had reps. And it was a long time ago when a million vendors weren't going to these supermarkets. But now, if you think about it, everyone wants to be in Whole Foods, right? In fact, when I remember even 15 years ago with a company, when we were trying to get into a local supermarket, it was probably like a Stop and Shop or Star Market or something like that. The first question they asked was, are you in Whole Foods or Trader Joe's? That was a validating business relationship. So they wanted to know that you had experience. Um, but it's not so much your own broker, it's a broker that works with that particular chain. Does that answer the
Yeah,
question?
but when you're really early stage and what you need is some local proof of concept, you'd go to somebody like Diane's single unit store in Pittsburgh because she doesn't have brokers, right?
With Diane's, well, actually, Diane, I can use this example. If I were, I'm sorry, what is the market again that you have, the kind of products?
It's the small grocery.
That's what I thought. Okay, so if I'm a vendor and I want to sell my products in your store, it's one approach. To Giant Eagle, it's another approach. That sort of separates, I guess, out the.
But you have to start with the Diane. Giant Eagle isn't going to even want to talk to you yet, right?
Well, if you have a really great product and someone from Giant Eagle has seen you at a trade show, yeah, they might help you with that process because they'll check to be sure you can build the inventory that you can sell through, understanding what needs to happen. But you might want to start with a company like Diane. It's just it depends on what you've done. If you've never sold to any supermarkets ever, including individual ones, yeah. But you might, if you're a sole proprietor, it's one thing. If you have colleagues in your business and you've hired someone who's done this before, they may be able to help you start with Diane, get some momentum with Diane. I mean, that would be personally my advice and my approach, and then see what happens. You know, I mean, you just don't start with the big supermarkets.
Yeah, Emma's asking, so are you suggesting a trade show is a good place to be showcased first?
Yes, a trade show is a good thing. Diane, would you agree that if somebody had gone to a trade show, that would be better approaching you to see if a product would sell or coming to you directly?
Yeah, my conversation is going to be just really different than yours because I'm a mom and pop shop.
Mm-hmm.
And so I attract specific vendors who are very local,
Yeah.
who are looking for as many mom and pop shops as they can find,
Right.
pick up their product. And so they're not at that point trying to get into, you know, you need a viable product. You've got all kinds of steps there where you have to do branding and you have to do production and you have to do, you know, there's a long way from, hey, I can make something to, hey, I can make 25 cases
Right.
of that product to sell or to deliver on order regularly. Like those are
Right.
two really different. So yes, I would probably be helpful in the very early stages of saying, I have a passion. I want to do this. I want to see if I can dip my foot in. I'm still working my regular job because I don't know that I can make enough money off of this passion to make ends meet. And
Right.
then you come around and you talk to me and I'll give you some information and we'll see. And I'm a great place to find out if there's a customer base for it.
Yes, exactly. I
People
was going to
actually
use
gotta pick it up.
Guido's example, but that's great that you would do that. Yeah.
James, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Diane, how do you find your vendors? How do your vendors find you, and what do you do to vet them?
Well, let me just see if Lisa wants to wrap up hers and we'll hand it off to
Sorry.
Diane for her to go next.
Yeah,
Lisa?
I'm happy to wrap up what I have been talking about, because since you have sort of a picture of my having dealt with lots of Diane type stores as well as the big supermarkets, and frankly did better at the local grocery stores over time. The only what I was going to say in wrapping though is there are brokers, and I would assume, Diane, that they come in to you with, by the way, I have these 18 products that I represent, right? There are brokers that specialize in mom pop, as well as distributors in mom pop grocery stores, because there are certain distributors where the purchase order is too large for a small store like Diane's. So yeah, Diane, take it away.
That's a great start. Okay, so Diane, why don't you take your 7 minutes? And James, I think you're asking exactly the kinds of questions that are the reason that I invited a Diane, somebody on the other side of that formula, to join us. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I own and operate a real small grocery. And I've never owned a business before. I'm a real entrepreneur. I learned about food by getting a master's in food studies from Chatham University here in Pittsburgh. So during that time, I was required to visit a food desert neighborhood. I visited Hazelwood. I got to know the community. I volunteered with a food buying club, which is a very cumbersome way to get food. I got to know a number of the residents. I wrote my thesis on making the case for doing fruits and vegetables in a low-income urban community. And for my thesis, I did a lot of research into the challenges and the strategies that food stamp users use and people who live in communities where there aren't grocery stores, what they use to get food on the table and what kinds of foods they eat, depending on how far they have to travel to bring it home and how often they go grocery shopping and things like that. So the case that I made was that a small grocery in a neighborhood like that could outcompete Walmart and the big grocery stores with specific products because of proximity. And the products that we sell the most of are fresh prepared and fresh produce. So fresh prepared is we do deli sandwiches. We would not make it just as a grocery store. So we sell food ready to eat. We sell it cold, so it can be purchased with food stamps. We only do cold deli sandwiches, except once a week we have a special where we make a hot sausage sandwich and people have to use cash or cards to purchase it. But almost everything that we sell in terms of food is food stamp eligible, so that the neighborhood can pick it up, can come in, can buy 2 bananas a day, can buy a fresh deli sandwich for dinner, can buy potato salad, chicken salad, egg salad. Those are things, and we also have always partnered with a baker. So we have chocolate chip cookies, and we have cheesecake, and we have strawberry pretzel salad, which is a big thing in Pittsburgh. And that means that we are pulling people in for those products. Then they look around and they say, oh, you have cheese, you have meat, you have cold cereal at a decent price, you have pasta. And I go to wholesalers and I shop at a distributor, like a wholesaler that's located near Philadelphia. So I have a minimal order for delivery, for just to get a delivery from them. We've been in business for 8.5 years. We've grown from nothing we did not buy a business. We didn't move into a retail space that was active. We had to attract our entire customer base. And so we have sales of between 370,000 and 390,000 a year the last couple of years. The pandemic really helped us because that's just gross sales. So we have a cost of goods at 65%. So we run our business on the remaining 35%, and there's not usually much left over till we buy equipment and we do upgrades and we do maintenance and we pay our rent and utilities. And we don't have a lot of labor because we're a grocery store. We're not a made to order. I mean, we make the sandwiches to order. My husband is the sandwich maker, but we pay ourselves and we make our living off of the store. It's not, we're not raking in, we're not raking in over $100,000, but we are making a living off of it. How do vendors find us? The most fun thing is what happened once is that a gentleman walked in, clearly Jewish, clearly from Squirrel Hill, which is a nearby neighborhood, which is one of the biggest Jewish neighborhoods, urban neighborhoods in the country. And he said, we make kosher ice cream. Are you interested? And they made it in a synagogue, in a kitchen, they were permitted, they were a legit business. And they make this great kosher ice cream all from scratch, all with, good ingredients. So they had a nice story. They had a good product. They priced it well so that my ordinary customers were like, oh, And I said, it's as good as Ben and Jerry's. This is Phil and Bill's. They want to be the next Ben and Jerry's. And they make this product in Greenfield, right across from the Giant Eagle and the synagogue there. And everybody's like, oh, I drive past that synagogue every day. I didn't know that they make ice cream there. That was a great product. It was a very small operator. They scaled up. They got into the local grocery store chain, which is Giant Eagle. And then the October 7th thing happened a year ago, and they just disappeared because two young guys were running it at that point. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if they got pulled back into the army in Israel or what, but they just dropped it for them. But they were at that point looking for a co-packing company. So Lisa, it was like they practiced their product on their Jewish community and on small groceries that they could find. They sold the company to a younger generation. It was two older men who started it, and they sold it to one of their sons and friend. And then those owners were scaling up, and then something happened and they disappeared. They may come back. They have a great product. They have good recipes. They have a product line. I have been cold called many times by people who have products. I've had people walk in and hand me brochures or hand me samples. I was cold called. Another one was Wild for Salmon out of Alaska. And so I was looking for fish. I knew I had a salmon customer base, but I didn't like I was buying the salmon through a wholesale arm of a local grocery. And I didn't like the quality necessarily. It didn't seem to have the right draw that people in my grocery who are looking for a good quality, locally sourced if possible. Now, Alaskan salmon can't be possibly locally sourced, but they're looking for that kind of draw of something that has a reason for them to spend a little extra money on it. And so I told the salmon people, I was like, okay, I mean, I'm interested. I'll take a case of this and I'll take a case of this, which is stuff that I had sold I had sold salmon like that from a different source. And so they brought it. It was great quality. I have not a huge customer base for it, but I have enough of a customer base for it that I order from that company now once a month. Sometimes I skip because they have a minimum. So I'll skip and wait for the next month. So maybe every other month.
Do you have specific guidelines for people who want to sell to you? Like I see you on Wednesday afternoons, or drop off a sample, or do you have guidelines around it?
They have to be a legit business, of course, because, I have people who come in and say, oh, I make great candy. I make it in my kitchen. We're wonderful. Our family makes candy. And I'm like, do you have a health department permit from Allegheny County? And they're like, well, what would that mean? And I say, you have to do it in a commercial kitchen. You have to, so that's a barrier or a challenge for a lot of people who are like, we want to start a business and they don't know that they have to have that in order to sell to me, because I'm selling to a customer that they've never met. So for me, it has to be a legit, permitted, health department inspected business. Other than that, it depends on whether or not I think I can sell it. And it also depends on price. So I will have, like local farmers will come in, and only a couple, and they want to sell me, greens, which is fine, or eggs. Actually, I went looking for an egg farmer, and I went to the co-op, the East End Food Co-op, which has organic products, and I asked them for their egg people because that's what I wanted. And I found a great farmer. So he brings me a whole bunch of stuff, which is very pricey, but I have a small customer base for it. And so I'm slowly growing that customer base. Mostly, I mean, I've had a lot of people come in or cold call or bring things, and it has to fit the mission of my store. So my store is located in a low-income community. I don't want to put real expensive stuff on the shelves because it's insulting. People want the niche that I have is that my customers will spend a little more than the going grocery store rate if they feel like they're getting a product that's worth it. But they're not going to spend artisanal prices. They're just not. It's Pittsburgh. These are working class people. So that's where we price our sandwich. That's where we price our local products. I have a wonderful butcher that I went looking for because one of my customers said, you need to go up to Toma Meat Market. And I was like, okay. So I went and I checked it out. And it's a butcher about an hour north of Pittsburgh. They deliver into Pittsburgh if you have a minimal order. So I can drive up there if I have a small order that week. I've been ordering from them for almost 8 years. And they are big enough that they have a reasonable wholesale price. So what that means is that this is a nice illustration because they buy all local animals. They can't guarantee that the animal has been treated in a specific way because they buy from multiple farmers. And so they don't know which animal, which meat, which slice of steak came from which actual farm, right? But all the farmers are local small farmers. These are not feedlot animals. These are not animals from Nebraska. These are not, these are all, and they bring them in live. They butcher them there. They process them completely. They do all of that. They make their own sausage. They do make their own bacon. They make their own meat sticks. It's a very nice product. It's a Whole Foods quality product. Because they have a reasonable price, for me, a wholesale price. So there's always 3 prices for a product. The first price is direct to the customer for the person that made it. So Toma Meat Market has a direct to their customer price. The second price is their wholesale price to me. And they give me a 25% discount. And that's their wholesale price. Then there's my price to my customer because I have to add, my usual markup is 50%. On Toma Meat Market products, their beef, I mark up 35% because it's a pricey product. Their pork, I mark up 50% because it's much less expensive. It's a really great quality product, but it's much less expensive straight up. Their lamb and their goat, I mark up 35% as well. So I'm making less, but because it's a pricey product, I'm making a smaller percentage. On a steak, I'll make $5. But it's a smaller percentage than what I would usually make like on an orange or on bananas or something. They want for customers to be motivated to come directly to them because that's their best customer price. That's their best price. So they don't want to sell to me so that I can undercut that price. They don't want to set their wholesale price so low that I can undercut their price in their store, right?
So
But
if I went to buy beef at their store based on the pricing model you just said, would your price be the same as theirs?
it's still a little bit more, even with the 35% markup.
Which is what they want.
That's what they want. They want to have the lowest price. They don't control it though. So they don't give me a massive discount on wholesale. They give me a reasonable discount so they know I can mark it up and still make money off of it. And they expect me to mark it up 50% because it's that quality. And I'm in a low income neighborhood and I'm still only 8 years in. I'm not a big grocery store chain or whatever. But they'll sell lambs directly to whole lambs to Giant Eagle, and Giant Eagle will break them down and sell them for an exorbitant amount of money.
All right. I'm gonna pause yours because I think we could probably listen to you for the whole
Yep.
next hour.
That's all right. We'll do questions later.
But I want to give Stu and Julia a chance to tell their story and especially tell us about your the origin story for your new beverage and how it's going getting it placed out there. So you're on.
Well, we are London transplants about 3 years back. Long story short, Julia is a very well-known hairdresser in London, and we had this concept thing in Soho, London, which was combining her skills with mine, and I'm a whiskey geek, so we had a bar and a hair salon in one, which was probably the first fully licensed establishment in London at that time, and now it seems to be the going trend. So, long story short, we were looking to set up in Brooklyn, and just about the time we were about to sign the lease, the COVID hit, and then everything kind of got stopped, and then COVID was kind of done. We started looking at, and it didn't feel very widening what's going to happen to the city landscape, and it just didn't feel right. So we ended up in Hudson, which is about a couple hours north of New York City, and we established a parlor, and, and then it got a little boring, and I started messing around with old recipes, and we resurrected this rehydration recipe that we used for our own purposes, being intermittent fasters, working out a lot, and not overly sweet like Gatorades, or even like the powdered stuff, which is still like sickly sweet and fairly incomplete in terms of what needs to get in there. And then Julia complained that it wasn't me. And she said, make it carbonated because I want to have some fun. And we started calling it Lifesaver. And next thing you know, our neighbors and friends are asking about it and we're making it for everyone. And then we meet a craft brewer in Hudson who says, hey, we can can this stuff for you. And I'm like, how do you can anything to begin with? And in the end, we started messing around with it, and it became interesting to us. And then, having realized that something we might want to put on the market, having had very little experience with groceries or drinks, beverages, and retail, we started experimenting and putting little batches into first local markets around Hudson. Then found a way to the city, and we decided to test it in quite a variety of different retail environments. So we went from small mom and stores to very overpriced Williamsburg stores, to gyms, to medium range supermarkets like Adams in the Hudson Valley. And we are currently in the fourth iteration of the product, which is now called Electro Pop. So that's the novelty thing. And we are currently at a stage where we are quite happy with the results so far, in terms of what it showed and how we tested the market and where the recipe and the branding is. And we're now speaking to investors because we realized we need a strategic partner that would help us get around this very topic, because we don't have a lot of experience in going national and understanding the intricacies of the beverage industry to the level where we would like it to accelerate into. So it's interesting at this moment because we're speaking to some fairly important names in the industry that have been around for a while and been in pretty important roles in big beverage companies. So we're getting all kinds of interest and advice, and it's the challenging part where we're now basically raising funding, but also trying to pick someone who's going to have Rolodex and the experience to help us speed up the process, because we did start the whole grassroots thing and it seemed to be working well, but we are now kind of aware of the amount of work and experience needed to go national, which is what we're trying to be. So yeah, we're at that stage now. But in terms of getting onto shelves, we learned the hard way. I mean, we didn't even know where to start. So we would do basically dropping into stores that we liked, and it was hit and miss, to say it the very best. It was quite interesting to get a very humbling lesson in, I suppose, the amount of pride in the retail business, because from store to store we would be welcomed in different ways. We'd be, chased out of there in some, and really warmly welcomed and taught good things in others, and have a repeat business in some, and then have really, really strange incidents in others. So I think we crashed into the business and it's looking good so far. But in terms of the getting on the shelves thing, I guess our bottom line would be that it's complicated and it varies. We spoke to distributors as well. We got approached by distributors, and there's a whole different world out there from going at it on your own and then starting to discover that getting distribution doesn't really mean that you're in there. It's then that you have to start worrying about making the product move of those shelves that come through the distributor, and they should really choose carefully how to proceed with that. So we're now at the point where we are keeping the fourth iteration off the market because we're having these intense conversations with potential partners, investors. But it's been a trip even far, and we can only imagine how much more complicated it will get when we start doing things with a larger chains than we're doing business with right now.
Let me just ask this question. From what I've been reading about your product, and I have not been in a store that sells it yet, though it looks like there's several around here. I would imagine sampling is really important because people haven't tried a not sweet electrolyte fizzy soda or whatever we're calling this beverage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the key. I think education, especially when there's a product that's quite different from the usual suspects, you basically have to just educate. So the only smart way of spending your marketing money is probably at the point where you can turn it into a sale, as opposed to trying to sort of shoot off the hip and either do social media or any kind of standard advertising, because when something's new, people tend to be suspicious of it. And even though if let's say the branding is on the money and it looks good, it looks interesting, there's a risk, and you just have to go and let them experience it and explain and educate, and that's probably the only way in, as far as we're concerned, because we've tried a little advertising and it was just basically a waste. Yeah, so I would say until you're at the point where you are saturating your existing market, where you feel like you could push it further with some big muscle advertising, maybe that would be the case to go forward, but we're not at that point, so we're still very much focusing on demos. That's like the sure shot way of getting people to know about it.
I have one question I want to ask. I know Diane talked a little bit about how she prices, like, for instance, the meat that she buys, but for Lisa and Stru, since you're already unmuted, Stru, how do you price it? I know you sell it direct off the website, and then how do you price it if Prairieville Market wants to take it so that they get enough money and you get enough money and you're not actually losing money by selling your beverage?
That's actually an interesting question, because originally we were a little bit optimistic, and we figured we'd go down the route of even though we're not producing at the scale where that would be immediately straight out of the gate profitable for us, we thought that would be a reasonable marketing expense to approach it, to sell it at a price point where the big names would be selling their product at, and then just basically have an RRP, which would differ wildly depending on where you are. I mean, we'd see our product being sold from RRP of $1.99 to literally double in hipster groceries around Williamsburg and Brooklyn. So I guess there's no simple answer to that question, because some buyers are very open to just making sure there's a win-win, whilst others are asking about the RRP and basically not willing to say what they will be selling it at. So that at the time we were happy to just sell it at our usual pricing, that was again built upon the premise that it's marketing cost, that we're just basically not profiting from the product at those prices, but we're making sure that it's moving and it's getting out there. Whereas more recently, we did start to change that tune, because we kind of started thinking, no, I think we do need to be profitable straight out of the gate and perhaps accept the fact that we can't compete with the big boys on the pricing at the scale that we're producing at currently. So then we started having a little bit more open conversations about, like say, approach someone and say, okay, we see where you sell similar products at where they land in your shelves. And then we would kind of inquire about what margin is acceptable for them and then form the price off of that. Because basically, otherwise we'd end up, selling a beverage for say 119 wholesale and have it RRP'd at like 199, and then someone would charge 4 for it, and then be like, okay, maybe that's not working for us that well. But it took us a while to figure that out. And actually, I might ask a question because a margin of 50% was just mentioned, I believe, and I was under the impression that that's a truly glorious margin for an average retailer, and that normally distributors that we've been talking to and working with usually tell us that their retailers are accepting 35 as a pretty decent margin and 40 as a standard, whereas 50 would be considered something of a premium. And or did I get that wrong? Just to shoot back a question right
Diane.
at you.
Go ahead.
The markup is 50%, which gives me a 35% margin.
Stu, you muted yourself.
Yeah, but I'm just
Sorry.
swiping on the phone and it's showing everywhere. Pardon. Yeah, got you. Okay, I think I misunderstood that. In that case, the 35 where we are landing, which is fine. Yeah.
Lisa, what's your experience with how these things price themselves?
Well, what we used to do as we were developing products is we would look at what the competitors' similar product, if there was such a thing, or find something that was similar, and we would develop things to a margin so that we always knew we didn't have something that we created and then have to price it in case it came in too high. So, for example, when we developed a line of sprouted grain muffins, we knew what the muffin market was sort of available to consumers at, and then tried to make ours, even though they were organic and made with more expensive ingredients. It was through size and ingredients, and it had nothing to do with volume in the beginning, because you can't deal with volume in the beginning because you don't have it. But we went after a certain margin and developed something to that cost, the cost to the retailer or the distributor, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, well, it also makes sense if you have a set product. And one of the things that sounds like Stu and Julia are being challenged with is that they're still tweaking the product and they're working with an outside beverage canner, right? So there's some costs of this that are probably still in flux.
A co-packer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably have an agreement
well-
though with certain costs that there are certain costs that they're charging you, right? So is it structurally the same and then your products vary based on ingredients?
I think it's also about the scale of production to begin with, because 1,000 minimum, so you get it.
Can't hear.
Stu, you're cutting in and
Cans,
out.
which
It
are
might be
also
because you're
like,
outside.
there's a minimum order for amount that you want to produce, and we're actually at the best spot we could find for Wi-Fi in this place. I do apologize. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, it's a little better. Maybe turn your camera
Yeah.
off, then you don't have that bandwidth.
I think problems. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
right,
see
let's
that.
try
How
again.
about this? Would this
Yeah,
work
that's-
better?
That's
Yeah.
better, yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of pricing and economies of scale in the beverage business, like sodas, when you go to co-packing, you are facing fairly large minimum order amounts, which then put you in a fairly on a disadvantageous position if you're trying to get product reiterated and react to want to get into the position where you make 10,000 cases and you have another 50,000 printed cans left over if you come to the conclusion that it still needs a tweak. So that's we went around it by doing our product at local craft brewery at a lower scale, which is obviously good for the agility of reiterating, but it does not provide the same cost efficiency as if it would be produced at a co-packer. So it's a little bit of, catchy to, do you want to go and blow the money on producing and then seeing what the market response is, or do you want to spend a little bit more on being fast and reiterating, which is the latter?
Well, I wish I had the answer for you.
It's not, it's so, wow. It's not answerable really, because part of it is cash flow. I mean, you have to preserve your cash, obviously. What Diane was saying earlier about the fact that she and other small supermarkets can be good testing grounds for sampling, for looking at velocity. If you're selling 5 cases a day or 5 cases a week or 5 cases a month in Diane's store, you might sell either half that or the same amount or double at a chain, and you don't know. And it's better to just do it slowly if you can afford it. But it is important to get the Diane experience first. So I don't know how you would do it. I mean, given the co-packing, the contract manufacturing process that you have, you guys, Stu and Julia, they must have minimums that they tell you they can do for you. So many tens of thousands of cans, right?
Yeah, normally if to co-packer, it's usually about 10,000 cases is the minimum.
Yeah. So one thing I can say is minimums are a good way to get things going. You can see a lot. And when you're a young company, first time entrepreneur, you get a lot of people waive they work with you. I found in the industry, it's great, and they'll help you along. Because people want products to succeed. I mean, not everyone.
Well, the one thing I'd worry about with the going slow advice, which Lisa, I generally would agree with, is it feels to me like there would be a pretty big risk of a Me Too thing, especially with the size of beverage companies, that Coca-Cola, all they need is a case of Lifesavers Electro Pops, and they're going to have their version on the shelf in Atlanta next week. I mean, do you start to worry about that stuff?
I can tell you what we did. First of all, product is one thing and execution is something else. So companies succeed not because they have a great product, but because they're executing well, whatever it is, buying ingredients, running their company, sales and marketing, whatever it is. So if Coca-Cola really wants it, they'll buy it from you. They won't necessarily copy you. They don't have that kind of time. They can't really do that. I mean, certain things they can, but the barrier to entry on food and beverage is fairly low in terms of there's a lot of food, a lot of CPG products. There are a lot of beverages out there. another small company with good executable processes can compete with you. It's part of the business, really. But I always, when people say, oh, they're going to steal your idea, I always think in terms of, well, they can steal my idea, but can they execute it as well as we can? Are they going to have strong relationships with our contract manufacturers? Like, are they going to lead a good team, have good salespeople, be kind in the marketplace? It probably sounds a little Pollyanna, but it really is about execution. But I mean, it's a good question, Deborah, because it is true that there's some stealing that goes on.
Go ahead, James.
Just for Stu and Julia, a good friend of mine works in a national flavor tea company, iced tea. And he told me a story of a guy that started about 4 different like monster beverage companies. And what he'd do is he'd use influencers on the social media. And that's how he gained a lot of market. So it wasn't the advertising, but using those influencers. And Stu and Julia left, and that was to their benefit.
I'm pretty sure they just got disconnected and they'll be back.
But basically, Coca-Cola and the big guys we could have hundreds of different varieties, but when they get something that gets success, they end up just giving massive amounts of money, buying them out, and then shutting it down. Yeah. And that's what this guy's exit strategy was. He would just build it up, use the social media influencers, get market share. Coca-Cola would give him in, write him a big check. He'd go 6 months and vacation in Europe, come back, start the next one.
Sounds like a good life.
Nice,
Diane,
nice
I want to ask you a question, and then I want to open it up for other people and for you to all ask each other questions as well. Is one of the things that kind of made my eyes boggle when you started talking about even just the meat producer, when you talked about, well, I do him at 35% and I do him at 50%. It's like, how on earth do you keep track of what it costs you to buy everything, what you're selling it through? I mean, it sounds to me like an administrative nightmare. I assume there's a software system or something that helps you track all of this, because I don't know, how many SKUs do you have in the store?
I don't know the answer to that. We do have a register that reads all the barcodes and spits out the price. We're very small, and that's probably the best answer to that, is that my husband and I run it. We walk around the store every day and take inventory for what we need to purchase for the next day. Once a month, we put together the order that we need to put into the wholesaler in Philadelphia. Once a week, I go through and I go through the meat freezer and I order from the meat guy, from the butcher. So I have same thing with the dairy products. It's a local Turner Tea. If anybody's from Pittsburgh and knows Turner, they're awesome. So we do as much local as we can. Over 50% of what's in our store is locally sourced, which means a smaller, medium-sized company. Some are very small. Some are, for the Allegheny County area, they're a big, for this area, they're a decent sized company with, lots of delivery trucks and 400 employees. But they're not, the national stuff, we sort of feed off. We're bottom feeders on the food system, where my husband goes and shops the deals in all the grocery store and all of the pharmacies and the dollar stores and that sort of thing. And that's how we get chips and, anything that's a name brand. We sort of bottom feed off of wherever we can find it on sale. And then we mark it up back to its normal price. And then we resell it in our store. But I am constantly, whenever I get a delivery from or place an order, I check the prices and I check the change in prices and I adjust our price. And it is time consuming. So that's a lot of what I do. Whenever we have a delivery come in from the butcher once a week, I look through and I have probably 15 to 20 items. And so I just check, and it's almost always the same. So that's the other thing that you find is when you're doing wholesale, there are a few things that move that are very volatile. Like the price of grapes is incredibly volatile because the supply and demand fluctuates so much. The price of tomatoes is the same. the price of cabbage is the same. The price of zucchini is very volatile. So you know what's going to be, the price of meat is stable. It will go up 10 cents a pound. And so I have to catch it when it goes up 10 cents a pound and adjust my price. If I miss it that week, I catch it the next week. So if we're in a terrible rush and I just have to price everything and throw it in the freezer, I look at it later, I go back, I might have sold, you know, a couple items at that price, and then I adjust the price and relabel everything.
All right. Why don't I open it up? Em, I know that you have had a few things that you've typed into the chat. Do you have any questions for our panelists?
I guess, thank you guys. And this was really very interesting stuff. I guess my question is, so as a small business that I've just been doing markets and selling myself, I have not gotten into retail yet. And like, would your best advice be like, how do you approach a small business like Diane? Like, what is the best way to do that? Cat, that's awesome. Like as of right now, so I'm a children's book author and I have plush toys. Because I'm an illustrator as well, and so I design the characters. So, like, would I bring samples and leave them there? I have a sell sheet. Like, I'm not. So I guess that's. I don't know. I'm not sure. That's my
I'm
biggest.
not in the grocery space, but I don't know that the
No, it's
principle of
obviously not in the
selling into a gift shop is that different than selling into a grocery.
Right. Yeah.
I
Go
can
ahead,
speak-
Lisa. Do you want to give advice?
Yeah, I can speak to that because someone asked me recently in the last 5 years to help them figure out how to sell. They were creating beads and then making jewelry out of beads, and thought I might know people because it was in the Berkshires and she was in Boston. And basically, if you think in terms of pretend you're the retailer and what you have time to see. So that will inform the vendor, the creator of the product, to be sort of efficient. Assume you have 10 minutes maximum. Probably Diane, you would be able to answer that better. Maximum 10 minutes to see a vendor. And so everything should be very clear on whether it's a brochure or some kind of sell sheet, and samples that aren't a million samples all over the place. But I think we were advised, we asked a retailer this, just a friend who was a retailer, and she said, what the jewelry vendors do is they have a box and they open up the box and then there are all these things with everything hanging inside. So in other words, you would bring what you have, but think of it in terms of the retailer doesn't have a lot of time. But it shouldn't make you feel like they don't want to see you. You know, still be happy and proud of what you're selling, but think of it in terms of that. Did Diane, did that capture any of how a new tomato sauce would be presented to your store?
So a successful vendor for me is going to be somebody who has a product I already know I like, I already know I can sell. So like the salmon one, I already knew I could sell salmon. I just didn't like the grocery where I was getting. I didn't like the quality of the product that I could get. And also the complications of having to go to another grocery and talk to the, you know, whatever. So, but I knew I had a small customer base for salmon. I knew that they had a good product because of what they could tell me about their product, how it was sourced, you know, how it was branded. It had a good story to connect it to it. So I knew that I would be able to sell it. And that's, I guess, because I've been in the business for 8 years. I've been in this grocery. I know my customer base. My advice to Emily would be to go to bookstores and go to the kinds of places and do a walk around. And when you see people who are carrying the type of thing or a similar product, that's somebody who already has a customer base for that product. So they're going to be interested in yours if it has a good story, it's a decent price, it's eye-catching, you're able to present it in a way that they know that they can tell that story to customers and get them interested in it. but they already have something similar, so they're already, you know, they're not going to have, if they don't have that on their shelves, they don't have a customer base for it. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would do that. Some people who've found us have looked online, so you don't have to walk in. You can look online and see which retailers are carrying that type of thing. Like Wild for Salmon didn't walk in. They had a customer in Pittsburgh that was buying a decent amount of stuff from them. And so then they were like, okay, are there other small groceries in the Pittsburgh area that special, you know, that have some kind of meat with quality, right? So I have local meat and I have a lot of it and I'm proud of it and I have good, and there's I'm already selling it as a product that people who care about the animal food system that produces their meat are already looking for me, right? They're already walking into my store, they're already coming in. So if there are people who are already selling children's books, who are already interested in that customer base in the children, they're already connected to nurseries or kindergartens or the school system, or, you know, and they already have something going on with that, with your customer base, because that's who they are, is their children who want plush toys, or they're the moms of the children.
Mhm.
So let me ask a really basic question, and this is, I feel dumb for not knowing the answer. Let's say M walks into a gift shop or a place that specializes in kids stuff, and she gets them, and they like the characters, they like the books. She goes out to her car and she gets a dozen of each, and they take the stock. Do they pay her for it, or does they take it on consignment and then she has to come back in 3 months, and if they haven't sold it through, or when do they pay her? How does a deal work in a case like that?
So I don't do anything on consignment. I just buy it and then I see if it sells, and if it sells, I'll rebuy it. And I pay for it with a check at the time that I get it.
And would you buy 12 of it, or you'd buy 6 of it and then see if it sells?
So the farmer comes and he has what's in season in his farm, and he shows me in the back of his pickup, and I say, I'll take that case of green peppers and I'll take that case of apples, but I don't want that kind of apples because I don't think I can sell that, or I already have it. And I don't want those squash because I've tried to sell them before and they just don't sell. But I don't return things unless they're spoiled. So if
But,
I take a
but
bet
Lisa,
on it,
for the beaded necklace lady, was
Mhm.
the expectation that the store owner was going to buy them outright?
It's a great question and not a stupid one, I have to tell you, because what ended up happening was, even within the same chain of 5 stores, one store bought it outright. Another store wanted it on consignment and asked if that was okay. And it was probably split down. Probably the other 3 bought some. In terms of quantities, they bought different kinds. This is a clothing store chain that has 5 or 6 stores in this area, but they're all different. So one bought, and also the jewelry is one of a kind. So they bought things that were sort of more aligned with their customer base or the clothes they already had in the store, and they would hang them, make outfits or whatever they do with jewelry. And that's how it, so it does work differently. I can't, I don't think I ever sold food on consignment. I don't know if anyone
Right,
did that. I
right.
think with clothing,
Yeah.
and certainly with your things, Emily, I think that would.
Stu
But
and Julia, did you collect outright from those cool hipster stores in Williamsburg? They paid for the product, or did they say, let me see if I can sell it?
It was kind of like buying it after trying the samples, and then paying, you know, in terms of like 15 or 30 days, or sometimes actually, and quite a few times we'd have to chase it up. And, you know, in some stores it would end up being like literally a year before you see a check. So it really varies with, you know, who you're dealing with. Sometimes people are, you know, writing out the check there and then. Sometimes you have to chase it. So it really is down to the individual store, I'd say.
I'd like to speak for a second to the psychological part of this. if you can sell smaller quantities into the store, I know it's great to have the money on 12 items, but if you can sell 4 and they sell out quicker, and they're calling you back or you're checking and they say, yeah, we sold all of those books, all of those toys. It's better than selling them 12. And Diane, this might be your experience too. It's better than having a slow seller. And it's just, the math basically. And you might be, maybe you can do even smaller quantities, whatever, it works. But I think it's always better. I always felt more comfortable having fewer cases, except when we dealt with Costco, obviously, but fewer cases in a place because I wanted them to run out or have to call us back or have to hear from when we came back and asked them that they had sold them. It just, I don't know, psychologically, it's better that a store owner doesn't have too much inventory of your product. Sorry, did you want to?
And was there follow-up?
Kind of, if I can just ask real quick, whose responsibility is it to, like, am I supposed to drive traffic to, if I get into, say, 5 local stores, am I supposed to be driving traffic to 5 local stores even though I sell it myself on my website? Or like, is it the store's responsibility to sell the stuff? Like, is it?
I'm not sure I understand.
She wants to know whether the expectation is once the store is stocking her characters and her books, are they expecting her to drive traffic to their store?
Oh, yeah, probably with every product, it's dry. Most stores, and I don't know so much about a store like Diane's, but most stores expect that you're going to be doing the marketing, that you're either going to be pushing it on social media and saying, and by the way, you can find it in these 5 locations, or you're going to give them some samples, or if it's food that you're going to sample it. It is, as much as it's great to sell a product into a store, it's really better to, when it goes the other way, out of the store too. Kind of, yeah. Does that make sense, Diane, based on your experience?
I
That
think
you,
food is, yeah, I think food is different. I think, so I buy from a honey producer and he sells honey around the region, the Pittsburgh region. And so he has his own website and he tables at a lot of like markets, farmers markets, or, different events or different honey events, or he'll have a table and he'll, he and his girlfriend will go and they'll take so much product and they'll put it out.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he has on his website a list of local stores. So like if people want to walk in and just get one thing, or they don't want to order it online, or is he advertising for me? I think he is. I think on his website he would say carried at, Dilamana's Market, or I don't think he's out there at his tabled events trying to sell Dilamana's Market. You know what I'm saying? Like, but the other thought to a previous question was like in marketing, it's up to the vendor to say if they'll like split a case. Because I'll order from the honey guy and I said, could I have half this kind of honey and half this kind of honey in the case for the case price? And he says yes or no. Like he's allowed to say, yes, I'll split that case for you, or no, we only sell it the 12 jars of the one kind as a unit, or sure, I'll put in 6 of this kind and 6 of that kind. That's fine. Or 4, 4, and 4. I can do that. So it's kind of up to I think it's up to the vendor to say what they're willing to do in terms of splitting a case or smaller quantities, but I think the point of wholesale is to have a better price for a larger quantity, right? So I do run into that, like the distributor from Philadelphia, everything's in a case. I have to buy it in a case. I can't buy individual.
manufacturers over time will, these case quantities will change. Some vendors, like the honey vendor, will be able to give Diane a mixed case, but it might get someday to the volume of so many cases and so much production that it's going to be too expensive for them to do that.
Right. Also, there's, if I buy an individual piece, it's a slightly higher price than if I buy 12 of them. Right, per each.
Any other questions before I ask my wrap up question? I know Barbara and CJ, you guys have been off camera, but I don't know if you have a question.
Can I ask Greg what was in the background?
Yeah, we'll get him in a sec. Go
At
ahead, Barbara.
Boston? Oh, just what I wanted to know.
Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have a question. I think I can probably speak for both of us to say that we've just been listening to see if there's any tidbits of information that might apply to the arts business that we are already in, and we're at a place right now where we are looking to expand. We have consignment arrangements with some galleries and shops, and a little bit of very limited like direct sale, but that's something that we are gearing ourselves up for with our prints and cards. So I think that this program, the subject of this was of interest to us from that perspective.
Great, thanks. Greg, did you have any comments?
This has been a really interesting conversation. I don't profess to have a lot of consumer packaged good or retail experience, but what little I have has been in supply chain management, software and service solutions, that when you get big enough and you are dealing with larger retailers, at least my experience has been the whole process of ordering, shipping, invoicing, etc., does become a data exchange. And so that may not be as critical an issue for the smaller retailer and the smaller producer, but it's something to be thinking about for the future as you grow in your business, for sure. And when it comes to pricing, wow, talk about a like a Wild West kind of wide open sort of a topic, right? And I'm a big proponent of value-based pricing. So if your product is better than somebody else's, I think it's absolutely perfectly fine. In fact, almost a requirement that you charge a little bit more for it, even in the early stages. That would be a way to distinguish and differentiate yourself with. I spent a little bit of time in the fitness business, back to things like hydration drinks and things like that. To me, that sounds like a place where that kind of a product would get a lot of attention, more so than competing with and I apologize if I got it wrong, but it would be more targeted to a prospective customer than, let's say, in a small grocery or in any other retail establishment. That's really all I had to add. And thanks for making this so interesting. This was really fascinating.
Good stuff. Do any of the three panelists have sort of a closing thought or advice that they would want to give to somebody who is trying to stop selling direct to consumer, whether at a market or online, and wanted to start selling through retail channels, that you wish somebody had given you when you started?
Well, we'd probably just give advice that kind of goes back to Emily's question. Distribution deals are relatively easy to get, but you have to be really careful because you do have to push your own product and make sure it moves off the shelves. And that's the part where, you kind of learn the hard way. And another thing I would probably say is also keep a very good eye, obviously, on the distribution deals that you make, especially in regards to territorial exclusivities and the performance markers, because there are situations when you say yes to a distribution deal where it doesn't perform as well as you thought, and then you might want to come out of that deal, and it usually comes at a penalty price that's contractual, and you do really want to pay very, very like particular attention to that part. That's the advice that we could give from our own experience.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Lisa, any advice?
Yeah, I did think of one thing, and then it occurred to me that if after this, when it's all percolating in the next few hours, can we write something into you, Deborah, that if I have if it's occurred to me that I have a list of things and outline based on this conversation and now knowing what people are doing, to if that helps, but that wasn't what I was going to add. But
Yeah, no, I will probably be sending the follow-up from this, not today and not
Okay.
tomorrow because it's our summit, but on Wednesday. So if you have any follow-ups, and I'll also give you ways to get in touch with all three of the panelists. So
Okay.
someone has a follow-up question for you.
Yeah. Well, I have to actually leave soon, but there was one thing that I wanted to say, and it was that one thing that young entrepreneurs, in my opinion, should be aware of in terms of growth is that it's very exciting when you go to a trade show and whatever the big industry leader is in your segment wants to place an order with you, that it's not just the product costs, it's the scaling up costs, it's the inventory, it's the people that need to be hired to get it off the shelf, it's the whatever, the influencing, to your point that you made, James, earlier, everything is going to be bigger. And so one of the advantages of a combination of selling online and selling to smaller retailers is that you can do a lot of volume that way, but selling to massive retailers can be very expensive. Everyone wants to get into Costco, wants to get into Walmart and all these. It's just the scaling up even when you run the numbers, it takes so long to get profitable that it's almost counterintuitive to growing a business. I know it sounds funny, but it is. I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron, but it is. I mean, it's not. It's well, it's an oxymoron, but it's counterintuitive. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
No,
Anyway.
I think that there, if you think about how many coffee bars you needed to make to fill a Target order, all of a sudden it's like, wow, was this what I wanted to be doing?
That's right.
All right. Diane, parting thoughts?
So, I mean, that did make sense to me, that idea that, there are places where consumers gather, whether it's online or whether it's in person. So there's a certain kind of customer that's going to come through my store because I have basic ingredients and they're locally sourced as much as possible. And I expect people to make their own food. So I don't have a lot of boxed prepared stuff. I mean, we sell fresh prepared, but we sell all the ingredients for people to cook at home. So if that's what you have, then you want a retailer like me. Like if that's what you're selling, you want to go to the place where the people who are going to buy what you're selling are gathering. And so that's the value of a retailer, is that they're gathering those people for you. And then you as a producer can sell into that space. Or if you're finding an online place like Barbara and CJ, you want to place your online presence at the places where your customer base gathers. And you'll be much more successful if you can do that, because one blurb or one stop or one wholesale sale then reaches that many more customers.
And I think your earlier point, Diane, about being prepared when you walk in to wherever you want to stock your stuff, the candy license, right? It's the commercial kitchen. It's making sure you have a UPC code and a calorie count and all of the pieces. You need to have your ducks in a row to make sure that you're an appealing fit for whatever retailer or distributor is going to take you. So that's none of that is a nothing. And as Greg points out, as you scale, the data needs to also be persistent, right? So how many units did they take and how much are they paying for it and all the rest of that. So it's not a nothing, but it is a very appealing way to scale. And one last chance, any last questions, or we're gonna call it a day. Thank
Nice
you
to hear
all.
that.
Thank you.
Good luck with the investments, Drew and Julia. Hope to see you in Hudson. Thanks, Diane. Bye, Lisa. Thanks for joining us today. Bye, guys.
Later.
Everyone.
Thank you.